Yes, guys. Hello, 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 hello. Welcome, welcome. I hope you enjoyed the little video there. Welcome to episode 2 of TAMS Talks. Yes. Quickly with the introductions, my name is Kareem and I am the network director for TAMS. A big thank you to everybody who's locked in today. I feel like I'm hosting a radio show, but yeah, big thank you to all of the TAMS team members who are locked in the Zoom call right now. And hello to everybody who's watching via YouTube on the live stream. Yeah, like I said, my name is Kareem. I'm a third year medical student at King's College London. And before we get started with today's talk, I'm just going to quickly explain, the agenda for today, so you know what's going on in it. So a quick intro into who we are and what we do. And then our incredible speaker is just going to impart a little bit of wisdom on all of us. And after that, we're going to wrap up with a Q&A, which will be maybe about 10 minutes long. And just after that, yeah, that will be the end of the talk. So it should all in all take about half an hour. Very quick, very punchy, lots of key information, because we know that we don't have time to just sit around and spend 45 minutes listening to somebody talk at us, So yes, let's get started. If you have any questions and you're in watching through YouTube or you're in the Zoom chat, be thinking as the talk's going along and just drop them in the comments box. Drop them in the chat box if you're in Zoom, and then if you're on YouTube, obviously just write them in the comments. And we've got people monitoring both, so we'll get to the question at the end. Don't worry, we'll get to your question, yeah? So, yes, what is TAMS? For everybody who doesn't know, TAMS is the Aspiring Medic Support. So we are a registered community interest company based in London, founded by medical students for medical students, all right? By medical students for medical students. And our mission is to support aspiring and current medics from a socio-economically disadvantaged background. If you saw the intro to the video, which hopefully you did and you weren't late, then we break this down into the 3 E's. So that's engage, erase, and equip. So we provide students with necessary tools to support their career aspirations and career progression, assisting with everything from getting into medical school to becoming the best medical student and the best doctor that you can be. All right. So we do this through a bunch of various different methods, including mentoring, workshops, online resources, and we aim to equip all of our students and all of our members to overcome the various obstacles that are unique to their lived experiences. So, what's TAMS Talks? For everybody who wasn't able to tune into the last episode, or maybe this is the first time you're hearing about it, you're just thinking, what is this? What is TAMS Talks? So I'm just going to tell you what it is, isn't it? It is, as a widening participation company, our work doesn't end with getting students into medicine. Obviously, we have to support the students once they're inside. And currently, across the UK, there's an attainment gap between ethnic minority students and white students. And this is the same in all degrees, not just medicine. But obviously, as medics, we want to do what we can to bridge that gap. So TAMS Talks was a way for us to assist in the personal and professional development of TAMS members, and also to support other students and aspiring medics, and hopefully close that gap to the point where all of us are achieving our best, no matter where you come from or what barriers you faced or what experiences you may or may not have had. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our incredible speaker for tonight's episode. Caleb is a final year medical student at Exeter Medical School, and he is the Associate Director of the TAMS Network. So me and Caleb work together all the time, and he's coming up with so many incredible ideas for TAMS, which you're all going to find out about real soon. He is incredibly passionate about medical education and serves in various positions to mentor and equip the next generation of doctors. As a final year medic, he definitely knows a thing or two about how to study during medical school. I mean, the guy made it to final year. Do you know what I mean? Like, you know what you're doing if you make it to the end, right? So he's just got one more hurdle to pass, and he's going to pass it. No worries, no stress. So without further ado, I will present to you guys Caleb and let him give you this incredible talk. And I'm just going to take a back seat. All right?
Thank you so much, Kareem. Wow, what an introduction. I'm so humbled by that introduction. And yeah, so thank you so much, guys, to everybody that's given me this opportunity to share on such an important and pivotal question of how do we study at medical school. And this is a question that is so foundational to surviving and indeed, I think, thriving at medical school, but a question that I don't think we engage with enough. I don't think we engage with the mechanics and the principles underlying it. So that's what we're going to try and do tonight. And we all know the story of medical school. You know, we may be able to relate to some of these pictures. But actually, I thought a lot of people don't actually use physical textbooks anymore. So maybe these are more the like scenarios that we can relate with. This guy picture on the left really tells a story. When they say a picture tells 1,000 words, you can tell the emotions going through that guy's face right now. But I think we should take a step back. And the way tonight is going to work, I'm going to talk for maybe about 13, 14 minutes. I'm going to invite some questions. And how I'm going to speak, I'm going to talk on three major themes. So the first theme is, I believe, understanding the challenge, understanding the problem with how we study. The second thing, I'm going to run through what I believe the solution is. And thirdly, I'm going to talk about how we can apply the solution. And so you can think of it as getting the diagnosis, the problem, getting the treatment, which is the solution, and applying the treatment, actually using this treatment. So let's jump right into it. So understanding the challenge. What do I mean by this? So there's two elements that I believe are important here. One is the context. And what I mean by the context is what happens on a psychological level when students move from A level to medical school. Now, the stats will tell you that, you know, to get into medical school, you need to get the top grades, you need to get AAA, you need to get it the harder subjects. So you essentially have a situation where the brightest minds across the country are gathered together and put into this educational institution where they have to learn material in greater depth and volume compared to what they used to. Not only that, they also have to learn that material without any clear learning objectives, and they have to learn it with less time compared to A levels. And of course, they're in competition with each other. They're constantly being ranked and being assessed. And you also, well, obviously they need to have a life and take care of themselves because we need doctors to be healthy, of course. And then the second element that I believe is important is the culture. And, we may know about the culture in medicine of, actually wanting to perform. It's a high achieving profession. It's something that you've worked hard to get into. So you want to keep up this idea. Now, what does this lead to? Well, it leads to something that a psychologist called Dr. Dweck, she called it the fixed mindset. And what do I mean by this? Now, she did an experiment on medical students, actually. And these medical students got an exam at the start of their year. And you're not supposed to do very well in this exam. So most of them failed it. And she noticed that there were two different approaches to the failing of this sort of mock exam. One group of students felt that I need to prove myself in that next one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to increase the amount of time I spent studying. The second group of students, they decided to change the way they studied. So they conducted something called a post-exam post-mortem. Fancy term, essentially just going over the exam and trying to figure out what went wrong and what went right. And she found out, lo and behold, that the group that actually changed the way they learned were the one that succeeded with the course. Now, what does this mean? It's telling us the difference between what we call the fixed mindset and the growth mindset. And this is what I believe the solution is, because I'll outline the definitions of these. So the fixed mindset is a belief that your basic abilities and intelligence are unchangeable. It's almost like it's fixed, like the cards have been dealt, you've got what you've got, and you just have to prove it and prove it again every time you do an exam, every time you do a test. And you compare that with the growth mindset, which says that actually your abilities are not fixed and they can be developed and improved over time. So then you then start to perceive tests and exams and essays as each one being a step towards improvement. And this creates like an amazing passion for learning, because you become less driven about trying to prove yourself and actually more about the process of getting better. Now, someone's probably thinking, okay, Caleb, you're giving me all these philosophies about fixed mindset and great, okay, but I've got exams coming up in January. What am I going to do? And I'm like, I'm glad you asked that question, because what I want to do now is then look into and spend bulk of this applying the solution. What does this mean? How do we apply this growth mindset thing? So the first thing I want us to remember is that these mindsets are less about conscious decisions we make, but actually more lenses through which we see the world. So it's not like we actually decide that, oh, I'm going to dominate, I'm going to let the fixed mindset dominate my psyche. But no, it colors the way we interpret things, it colors the way we see things, and influences how we approach learning itself. And you can ask what's the differences between this fixed mindset and the growth mindset. Well, the key thing is about effort and how we see efforts, how we see prep, how we see studying. Is that the study that we do itself, do we do it to pass the exams? And of course we do. But the real purpose of the effort is to master the craft. That is essentially why we do it. Now, if we have that approach to things, then there's more of a motivation to do things rather than just prep for the exam. So there are some questions that you can ask yourself just to understand, like, what are the differences between these two mindsets? Because one is asking, like, what am I good at? Like, what can I actually do well and prove it again and again? But a growth mindset is asking, what am I willing to get good at? Now, how do we put this into practice now? And I think before I talk about the practical side of things, I think it's helpful to put a caveat, because now we all learn in so many different ways, and there are so many nuances and differences between, the way we learn, but not just that, just the way we're assessed, because we're all in different medical schools. And thirdly, we're all in different years, so it's going to differ slightly. What I can't give an ABC 10-step 10 tips. This is exactly how you're going to shift your grade up. I can't do that. What I can do is give principles, give ideas, and tell some of my own personal story. And then you take those principles and then infuse them with your own nuance and difference of how you study, but also how you assess at medical school. So what's the first principle? It's about the planning. And I cannot emphasize this enough. And this is something my dad used to say when I was a kid. He used to say, some of us might have heard this before, that if you fail to plan, you plan to fail. And that used to scare me so much as a kid. But I think the point of this, like in how we approach learning, we must be more proactive than reactive. We can't just say, I'm going to just go study. No. That's not specific enough. There needs to be a plan, like right from the start of the year or the term, of asking questions like, what modules, what topics are we covering this term? What are we actually, you want to see the vision ahead of you. What resources am I going to use to study? That's another good question, because I'm sure we've all been in situations where we want to do some studying, but actually we spend the first half an hour trying to find the right resource to use. We need to ask ourselves the questions, what are the exams and assessments right at the start? The point I'm trying to make is the first study session of the term of the year or anything is not really about studying. It's about setting the plan for studying. Because starting from that point means every single session after that is a lot more productive, a lot more efficient than without planning it. And I've put the questions up here that you can use to do almost like an audit, to plan. And this has been uploaded to YouTube, so you can look it up at a later date. What's the second principle? I talk here about being crystal clear about study, and I put that in quotation marks. The reason I've done that is, I feel like we tend to treat studying as a sesh. You're like, what, I got my snacks ready, water's on deck, I've got my bags packed, I'm going to the library, you're not going to see me for 6 hours, fam, you're not going to see me for 2 days, I'm just gone. And we think that we're actually being productive. I think it's important to, and this is the way I used to see studying. I used to see it as, I'm trying to build a whole house and I need to lay it on brick by brick. Of course, when you're first year, it's going to feel that way. But as you progress, you start to realize that studying is less about building it brick by brick, but actually it's more about covering and fixing the holes in the wall that's already put up. And psychologists would tell you that this is actually how we learn. We take the new information and we attach it onto the old information. So what does this mean? It means that doing things like pre and post lecture run through, which is something that I do quite frequently throughout third and fourth year, is just actually taking a moment and saying, okay, what's actually going on next week? What am I learning? Because we feel like if I just go to the lecture, make some notes, and then prep for it before the exam, that's good. But actually, the psychologists would argue that doing the pre, going to the lecture, and the post is the best way to learn on a psychological level, because each time you go through it, you're reaffirming and reconfirming that knowledge, and that's being stored, and that wall is being plastered because the gaps in your knowledge are being filled out. And this is something that, you know, I alluded to earlier about the medical students doing something called a post-exam post-mortem. If you do mocks your medical school, if you do MCQs, anything like this, what does a post-exam post-mortem even involve? That's saying, you know, what happened? What did I do right? What was a waste of time in my prep for this? What caught me off guard? What caught me out in my prep? These questions are so important. Now, there's a third principle I think is helpful, and I've called this the science behind studying. What do I mean by the science? Now, there's a whole science that I can't even begin to go into about how we learn, about the neuroscience behind it, about the psychology behind it. And I've got some resources here that I'm going to share with everybody, because I think this is something that no one actually shows you, like the techniques that you can use. And I can't go through all of them. But what I can say is I can tell a personal story about how I've applied this to myself. So these are some of the resources that I talk about. And I think this website is excellent. It's by a guy called Carl Newport. And some of you may know his book. It's excellent for just understanding the mechanisms of learning and growing and studying effectively. This is another paper. If you literally just type into Google, how do I study at medical school by August in 2014, you find a paper, an actual systematic review that talks about how to study at medical school. Like, how amazing is this? And hitting the refresh button often and just saying, do you know what, I've been doing this and this and this before in the past, but actually I'm going to take a step back and I'm going to ask myself some just honest questions of what's working and what isn't working. And I said I was going to tell a personal story about this. So this example, it has to do with MCQs. So we use MCQs quite a lot in my medical school in Exeter. And I remember I used to do loads of MCQs, guys. I'll do like 100 in one session, and I'll back myself. I'll be like, after that was a big study session. And yeah, I suppose in some way I did learn. But then the exam would come up and I'd find that actually I went through this topic in my MCQs, but I don't understand it enough to the point where I can actually answer this question confidently. What was happening? I was taking a fixed mindset approach. I was looking at those MCQs as a way to test my knowledge and how I can prove my knowledge. But instead, I should have been looking at them as a way, as an active part of my learning itself. So now I stopped doing just 100 at a go. Now I just brought that down to about 20. And I say, I'm going to cut through and dissect each question. I'm going to understand why the right answer is the right answer. I'm going to understand why each wrong answer is a wrong answer. I'm going to understand why this examiner is trying to catch me out with these questions. And it's just, I go back to my notes and I'm asking myself, okay, what was missing in my notes? What was missing in my flashcards? Now, that's just an example of just understanding, like, how do I take all this information? How do I make it more efficient in how I actually study? Now, you may or may not start to see all that why I gave all that ramble about growth mindset and fixed mindset, because I believe like the mindset that we adopt and the mindset that we use to approach our studying affects the motivation, but it also affects how we do it. It affects the technique. And I believe it affects the efficiency of how we study. Because if I switch my mindset and I see exams rather than just as a way to prove something, but actually as one of the tools in my toolbox that are helping me learn, then I can actually start building sustainable habits that make the prep less stressful, less time consuming, and just plain more effective. So I've got some application questions that you can take in your own time to ask yourself of how you can apply this to your own personal journey. And I think I just want to reiterate this point about growth mindset, because with the growth mindset, everything, and I say everything, is up for improvement, including how you study. And at this point, I'd love for people to ask questions, because I know this is something that's so personal and people are going to have different approaches to it. So I want to engage with people in their questions, and I'd love to answer them as best as I can.
Yes, that was a good talk. That was a very, very good talk, Caleb. Thank you. We definitely have a couple questions. You've been getting people talking in the comments and in the chat. So I'm gonna start with the first one. So two people asked a very similar question actually, which is regarding making notes in lectures. And I guess the question is, how useful are notes? Do you think that lecture notes are necessary, or could you just use Anki flashcards or question banks or these type of resources? And I know you already touched on this, but maybe just go into a little bit of detail regarding this.
Yeah, that's an amazing.
Your opinion.
That's an excellent question. Thank you so much, Kareem. And I think that question is that question points to like a larger issue as to how do we approach lectures? Because yes, it's notes, but it's also like not just notes, but you know, your engagement with the lectures. You know, what relationship should you even have with lectures? How fully engaged should you be with them? Now, I think with note taking, of course, everyone's going to have their own personal preferences, but I think it's important to really ask the question of why am I taking these notes? Like, what's the purpose of it? Now, there are some people that I know that they profusely write everything down as much as they can. And the reason they do that is because literally writing stuff makes them remember things. Now, if that's what works for you, and it does for most people, then that's fair enough. But I find that for me, the best way is to actually make my notes before. So if I make my notes, when I say notes, I'm talking concise, more about looking at the concept that's involved in the lecture rather than the specific thing. So that in the lecture, if someone asks me, oh, what did they go through? Teach me what you got taught in the lecture. I want to be able to give them the big ideas. I want to be able to give them the punchy. I want to be able to describe the story that was told in that lecture. I want to be able to give them the gist of the lecture. And that's what I do before the lecture. And you could argue, oh, like that's hard to do. It is hard to do if you don't plan it. If you plan it, it's absolutely breezy to do because it's on the schedule, you know? So I know it can be tough, and you could be like, oh, actually going through lectures, each lecture, but we all have all these grand study sessions. Rather than having a grand study session, how about just taking, whether it's, I don't know how many lectures you do, whether it's an hour, whether it's 2 hours a week, and just saying, you know, I'm going to just spend half an hour on each one. I'm going to go through the big ideas and the big concepts, and then make concise notes, go to the lecture, take in the information, and then add to those concise notes after. The new information then gets added to what you already have. Because what that does is, on a psychological level, you're learning that information 3 times, basically. You're learning it pre, you're learning it during, and you're learning it post. So I think that's a very efficient way to do it.
Yes, I agree, to be honest. Like you said, you touched on it briefly. It can be quite daunting at first to think about, you know, having to go over the lectures this many times, having to like do it beforehand and then do it afterwards. And I think some of the other questions now are coming through is if you could share a bit of insight into exactly how your routine looks. So how you're able to plan time to go over lectures so many times, basically. Yeah. Just give me insight into that.
Yeah. That's okay. Great question. So for me, what I find is that I basically map out my week and I say, where are the gaps? Where are the gaps that I can use? And when I say gaps, I'm not talking like I'm going to do like a 4-hour session. No, I'm talking like little punchy, like half an hour there, 2 hours there. Because it's in those times that you just think, oh, what can I really do in half an hour? What can I really do in 45 minutes? But actually, and this is something that Carl Newport talks about, and this is why I think Study Hacks is a really good place to go to, is that we tend to think, tend to have this like battle approach to studying. we like to think, okay, I'm gonna go for a sesh, like I'm about to go hard, I've got everything ready and I'm gonna do this. And we're gonna spend like hours just grinding it out. That's actually not how our minds work. Like our minds can just focus on something particular for half an hour, learn it. It could be just one topic. So what that looks like for me is that when I find these gaps in my schedule, whether maybe it's like, I don't know, 45 minutes in the week or 5 or 6, whatever it looks like, then I'll just plug those gaps. Then I'll be like, okay, which lecture am I doing on Friday? The gap on Monday takes that. Which lecture am I doing next Tuesday? The gap on Thursday takes that. And it's super simple, and it's something that, I mean, it's 45 minutes is not that long, you just have your lunch quick or something. And what that does is that it gives me in my head, I have that information and I'm learning it in that time, very short, very quick. I go to the lecture, I do what needs to be done, and I come out of the lecture and I just basically run through what I've already done. And also, I think people are going to ask me about memory, because obviously we get tested in exams. How do we memorize things? So I personally do find that flashcards are the best way to do this. Now, everyone's going to have a way to do it, but just telling my own personal, flashcards are the way, because what it does, flashcards have the combination of being able to test yourself, but also being able to actually replenish what you already have. So, and being able to concisely gather the notes, because you can't have flashcards of loads and loads of notes. You need to be able to concisely summarize all your notes into like a, I don't know, 4 bullet point or 6 bullet point flashcard. So it achieves two roles. It's being able to, because as you're summarizing it, you're learning it. And that summary, you can then blow up that summary back into your notes because you have those concepts in your head. So that's just my own personal take on that. And the other thing to mention is, that's why I highlighted the science of the studying, because, those papers that I talk about, they touch on this. They touch on the best ways to approach like memory and learning effectively and efficiently. So I think I can't go through all of them in this space, but I think plugging those is so key.
That is, yeah. I'm definitely going to have a look into it, because I think I can only speak for myself, but I've definitely fallen prey to kind of having a fixed mindset in terms of studying and just doing things because people said they were good, as opposed to necessarily looking into what works. And I didn't even think that there was a science of studying, you know what I mean? So I feel like a lot of people are probably feeling the same way. So we're going to just do one last one last question now, because that's all we have time for. And so it's from YouTube, and someone was just saying how amazing your talk was. And yeah, how have you found adjusting to virtual learning when you're planning your time so that you don't get online fatigue?
Oh, fantastic question. Online fatigue and working through that. So this is brilliant. And it is so real. Online fatigue. All my days, I found it hard. I must admit that because in final year, placement tends to take up more time, so there's less lectures to do. So in terms of obviously compared to third year where it's mostly just didactic tutorials and lectures. So I haven't had that struggle. However, I can give some tips on virtual fatigue. I think one is just being clear about, again, it goes back to scheduling and planning. I know that for me, if I spend a certain amount of hours on the screen, just looking at screens, I need to get up and take a break and move around. I need to start. One of the things people do. So remember this post-lecture thing I'm talking about, it doesn't have to be done with a screen, like there is pen and paper. You could go for a walk and just like, one of the things that Carl Newport in his blog talks about is sometimes when you're walking from one lecture room to another lecture room, which you can replicate by just leaving your room and walking out, is you can start telling a story of what you just learned. And you could think that, well, how would I do that? That I've just done that lecture. I don't want that anymore. What it does, again, it goes back to bringing the content back to your mind. And that achieves two things. Obviously, it helps you learn, but it also gives you a bit of a break from all the screen fatigue. So I think just putting those breaks in place, and just minimizing like the distractions, because let's be real, there are distractions online as well. You know, if you're learning as well as your entertainment is coming from the screen, then it's stress. So maybe it's about switching some of that as well. So yeah, those are just some thoughts.
Yeah, definitely. A couple things to look into there. Was the guy's name that you said, was it Carl Newport?
Yes, Carl Newport. Yeah, Cal Newport.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. That's for me, but I'm sure lots of people are going to be interested in, you know, maybe just having a little look quickly into the kind of stuff that he's talking about, because what you've said today has kind of opened my eyes, at least, and I think everybody else's eyes, from all of the comments that we've had and the questions that we've had. So yeah, unfortunately, we don't have as much time to answer everybody's questions. So what we will do is we're going to be in the YouTube comments and in the Zoom chat just afterwards for the TAMS team members. We will just have a quick chat to try and get through any last questions, or yeah, just the last few questions. But thank you so much, Caleb. That was an absolutely incredible talk. Smashed it. It was some good stuff, man. Yes, like I said, that is the end of today's episode. So episode 2 of TAMS Talks, finito. For everybody who watched via YouTube, I'm sure you love the talk as much as I did, really and truly. And I'm sure that you're interested in finding out more about what TAMS does and the kind of work that we do alongside of giving these like talks for medical students. So as you can see on the screen right now, you know, this is how you can join our community so that you can get more involved in the work that we do. No pressure. If you just want to have a little look at what we do, we've got some other YouTube videos, we've got some stuff on Instagram, some stuff on Twitter. So have a look at what we do and the people that we are reaching out to and working with to create change. And yeah, hopefully I'll see you this time next month. Thank you very much for tuning in, guys.